What could make a best friend turn into your worst enemy and lead them to unspeakable crimes? It's a question that would make anyone shudder. And this case, one of the most tragic stories, will surely leave you on edge. A story cloaked in mystery, with actions that defy moral limits and human kindness. The case involving Tiffany Hall and Jamela Tunstall is more than just a personal tragedy, it's a chilling lesson in how little we might truly know about the people around us. Hello. I'm John. Welcome to Killer Cases. Today, we'll dive into a case where a best friend became the worst enemy. Stay tuned until the end. Share your thoughts. And subscribe to the channel for more true crime stories. On a September afternoon in 2006, a woman named Tiffany Hall suddenly appeared at a local hospital, carrying a lifeless newborn in her arms. She claimed to have just gone through a tragic premature birth. But things were not as simple as they seemed. From the moment Tiffany walked through the hospital doors, her actions and words sparked suspicion among the medical staff. She refused any examination, adamantly declining any help or medical assessment of herself or the child. Tiffany maintained a cold, guarded demeanor that hinted she might be hiding something. Her firmness, along with her tense expression, created a quiet ripple of whispers down the hospital halls. What had really happened with this child? And why was Tiffany reacting so mysteriously? This scene didn't just leave questions in the minds of the medical staff but cast a shadow over everything. As if a dark secret was lurking behind Tiffany's actions, waiting to unfold. Only a few days later, the mystery deepened as a baffling disappearance occurred in the same area. A young woman named Jamela Tunstall, along with her 3 small children, vanished without a trace. Jamela, a devoted and careful mother, was 7 months pregnant and eagerly awaiting the arrival of her new child. Friends and family described her as a woman who was always there for her children, never allowing them to play outside without supervision. Jamela dreamed of a brighter future for her family and often shared that joy with those around her. But now, no one could find her or her children. News of Jamela and her children's disappearance quickly spread throughout the community, sparking waves of fear and dread. Neighbors and friends began wondering what could have happened, fearing something horrific may have taken place in the shadows. A chilling tension gripped the area, and familiar faces suddenly seemed cautious and wary. In the eyes of everyone, it was as if darkness had crept over every home in the neighborhood. Local police quickly got involved, combing every corner and crevice, hoping to uncover clues. Detectives began interviewing Jamela's friends and family, piecing together details from her life in hopes of finding answers. All signs pointed to the fact that this was no ordinary disappearance. Yet no one could imagine the extent of the crime hidden beneath. Then, one detail started to stand out: Tiffany Hall, Jamela's childhood friend. The two had grown up together, navigating the challenges and hardships of their East St. Louis neighborhood. They were close as sisters, sharing the ups and downs of life. Both became mothers at a young age and had supported each other through difficult times. But as the investigators dug deeper, it seemed that their friendship was far more complex than anyone realized. Piece by piece, a darker picture of Tiffany emerged. From an early age, she had exhibited violent tendencies and often stirred up trouble. She had clashed bitterly with her family and even had run-ins with the law. Tiffany's life was riddled with contradictions and secrets. She was known in the community as a troublemaker with a past that spoke of unsettling events. Investigators began seeing Tiffany and Jamela's relationship in a new light, suspecting it held more layers than simple friendship. As detectives delved further into the case, Tiffany's bizarre behavior at the hospital began to raise more questions. They wondered whether the newborn Tiffany had brought to the hospital was truly her child or if something far more sinister was being concealed. As Jamella's disappearance continued to defy explanation, police started to focus more intently on Tiffany. Detectives noticed that no one, not even her family, seemed to know if Tiffany had actually been pregnant beforehand. Was she lying? Or was there a carefully hidden plan behind her strange actions? Then, as if to add another layer of mystery, Tiffany decided to hold a funeral for the newborn. Yet, the ceremony took place in an atmosphere thick with unease. She arrived 2 hours late, showing no signs of grief or sorrow, as one would expect from a mother mourning her child. Even before the funeral, Tiffany requested to delay it so that more family members could attend, though only a few family members were present. Her indifference and unusual behavior left everyone at the funeral unsettled. These strange actions only deepened suspicions about what she might be hiding. Tiffany's story grew more complex and tangled, like a labyrinth. With each step, investigators felt as though they were being drawn into a dark world, where every clue revealed more disturbing secrets. Questions about Tiffany and Jamella's friendship continued to mount, and the shadows surrounding this case seemed endless. The case remains unresolved. But one thing is clear: Jamella's life came to an end in a horrific, mysterious way. Could Tiffany Hall truly be the person behind it all? Or was there someone else involved? Viewers find themselves immersed in a world of schemes and crimes, each question hitting them straight to the core, making it impossible to stop thinking, how could a friendship turn into such a nightmare? And what could drive a best friend to the edge of such horrific acts? In a case as horrifying as this one, the first question many ask is, what could make a best friend? Someone bonded since childhood become a merciless killer? To understand the depths of this crime, we need to go back several years, to when Tiffany Hall and Jamella Tunstall first met. It was a time when these two carefree young girls could never have imagined that fate would one day lead them to such a tragic and terrifying end. Tiffany and Jamella grew up together in the poor neighborhood of East St. Louis, where rundown homes and shadowed alleys formed the familiar backdrop of their lives. Both girls faced a childhood of hardship, but it was these harsh circumstances that bound them together. Their friendship wasn't merely about sharing joy and sorrow, it became a pillar of support in a life filled with relentless challenges. As children, they shared dreams and hopes for a better life. Although their circumstances were different, their bond seemed to transcend the precarious boundaries of their rough lives. Jamella, with her gentle demeanor and determined gaze, always showed a commitment to rise above her circumstances. She became a young mother, shouldering the weight of family responsibilities from an early age. But unlike many of her peers, Jamella never let hardship defeat her. She dreamed of a bright future for her children and yearned to build a happy family, one that could escape the struggles of their impoverished neighborhood. Those who knew Jamella were deeply moved by her dedication as a hardworking mother who gave her all for her family. On the other hand, Tiffany bore a soul deeply scarred by trauma. Although they both grew up in the same neighborhood and faced similar difficulties, Tiffany's way of coping with life was entirely different. Even from a young age, she displayed rebellious tendencies, sometimes to the point of violence. She had numerous run-ins with the law, becoming the troublemaker in the neighborhood and a source of family rifts. Tiffany's family often felt powerless against her volatile personality, and these conflicts seemed to leave her harboring a simmering resentment. According to accounts, Tiffany's psychological wounds began early. She carried an inexplicable anger toward the world around her, and this anger led her deeper into darkness. Every time a light appeared in her life, She seemed unable to shake off painful memories and remained stuck in the cycle of her past. Gradually, she became someone neighbors avoided. A friend few dared to trust completely. But for Jamila, Tiffany always held a special place. Despite rifts and differences, Jamila was willing to reach out a helping hand. As if she believed their friendship could rescue Tiffany from the shadows. During their teenage years, their friendship grew stronger as both went through life-changing experiences. Both became mothers at a young age, facing the challenges of raising children before they themselves had fully matured. Jamila saw this as a chance to improve her life, pouring all her love into her children and hoping one day for a better life. She worked tirelessly and fought hard to keep her family together. Meanwhile, Tiffany saw motherhood as a burden she couldn't easily escape. She struggled with raising her children and also became entangled in legal issues due to her violent behavior. Once, Tiffany even lost custody of her children due to signs of abuse. Although she was eventually granted parental rights again, her actions left those around her doubting her ability to be a good mother. Amid these struggles, Jamila and Tiffany's relationship remained. But perhaps out of an unspoken sense of obligation or understanding, Jamila, with her forgiving nature, continued to stand by Tiffany, despite warnings from friends and family. To Jamila, Tiffany was still the dear friend she had grown up with, the one who had shared in her childhood trials. But did Jamila realize that this friendship could actually be harboring a dangerous threat? As the years passed and Jamila's life began to stabilize, Tiffany continued to spiral into a cycle of legal troubles and mental instability. To those who witnessed their lives, these two women appeared to be on completely different paths. Jamila was building a bright future, while Tiffany was increasingly surrounded by the darkness of violence and past trauma. One was a light of determination, while the other was shrouded in anger and resentment. This stark contrast was perhaps the starting point of a larger question: could this difference ultimately have sown the seeds for the crimes that followed? However, beneath the facade of a strong friendship, doubts slowly began to creep into the minds of both. Jamila may have sensed Tiffany's mental instability, but perhaps she never imagined it could lead to tragedy. And Tiffany? Was it possible that the peace and success in Jamila's life stirred a deep, silent envy within her? Each encounter between them seemed to represent a moment of contrast, one friend always reaching out and helping, while the other remained consumed by negativity and despair. This marked difference between them became the foundation of a bigger question: was this opposition the source of the deadly crimes that would unfold? With each question raised, the case grew more mysterious and complex. Was the friendship between Tiffany and Jamila truly a lifeline? Or merely a mask hiding envy and festering resentment? And did Jamila, in her final moments, come to realize that the friend she had trusted for a lifetime would be the one to put an end to her life? One morning in September 2006, the small neighborhood where Jamila Tunstall lived was suddenly gripped by a tense and unsettling atmosphere. Jamila, a young mother beloved by many, along with her 3 children, had vanished without a trace. For neighbors and friends, this sudden disappearance was nothing short of a nightmare, filling them with worry and fear. And as strange details began to surface around this case, the mystery only grew deeper. While Jamila's family and friends desperately searched for her, an even stranger event occurred. Tiffany Hall, Jamila's lifelong best friend, suddenly appeared at a nearby hospital, carrying a lifeless newborn in her arms. She claimed she had just given birth in a local park. But sadly, the baby had not survived. However, what alarmed the doctors was Tiffany's refusal to undergo any medical examination, refusing to allow the medical staff to check her or the child. Her odd, unsettling behavior quickly aroused suspicion. Tiffany's actions at the hospital didn't just raise eyebrows among the medical staff, they also left a host of questions in the minds of those around her. Was the child she brought to the hospital truly her own? And if she really had given birth, why was she refusing a medical checkup? To the doctors and everyone who heard the story, everything seemed murky, as if a dark mystery was hiding behind Tiffany's actions, waiting to be uncovered. As investigators took on the case of Jamella's disappearance, all clues seemed to point to Tiffany. Her statements were filled with contradictions and inconsistencies. Initially, Tiffany claimed that she had been sexually assaulted, and the baby was the result of this incident. However, when pressed further, she denied it, insisting she hadn't been attacked at all. This only deepened the investigators' suspicions, leading them to probe further into Tiffany's statements in hopes of uncovering the truth. The detectives began tracking down every lead, starting at the park where Tiffany claimed to have given birth. They found a few scattered clues, though none were conclusive. But Tiffany's behavior grew even stranger. She continued to tell conflicting stories, frequently changing her statements in confusing ways, and refusing to cooperate when the police attempted to clarify details. Adding to the mystery, Tiffany soon organized a small funeral for the newborn she claimed was her own, naming the child Tiffany Horn. However, the funeral unfolded in a way no one could have imagined. At the last minute, she requested the service be delayed, saying she wanted to wait for more family members, though only a few showed up. Incredibly, Tiffany arrived 2 hours late, further intensifying suspicions about her true intentions. At the service, she appeared detached, showing no signs of the grief expected of a mother who had just lost her child. Her behavior only fueled everyone's doubts that the story she was telling was nothing more than a calculated act. Meanwhile, Jamella's family and friends grew anxious as they received no word from her. Every call to her phone went unanswered, and no one could find any trace of her or the children. Gradually, a chilling question began to haunt everyone. Could there be a connection between Jamella's mysterious disappearance and Tiffany's strange actions? With each new clue, the case grew more complex and layered. Neighbors couldn't stop thinking about the unusual events unfolding in their neighborhood. The story of Tiffany appearing with a lifeless newborn, Jamella and her children's mysterious disappearance, and Tiffany's contradictory statements left everyone wondering, was there a horrifying secret lurking behind it all? As detectives continued to follow each lead, they couldn't ignore that all signs seemed to point toward Tiffany. A dark plan began to emerge through her statements, though there were still many gaps to fill. Tiffany's story led investigators into a maze of lies and secrets, where every answer only brought more questions. With each change in her story, the detectives had to reevaluate and piece together the details, hoping to uncover the truth hidden behind her facade. Gradually, the detectives began to sense that the disappearance of Jamella and her children was no ordinary case. They felt the shadow of a meticulously calculated crime, where the person behind it may have planned each step to erase any trace. But what was the motive behind this crime? Why was Tiffany acting with such contradiction and mystery? Was she hiding some horrific truth? The investigation continued, and with each new piece of evidence, the case revealed dark and unexpected corners. What was behind Tiffany's lies? Could the truth ever be uncovered? Or was this all a ruse to deceive the police and conceal the horror lurking beneath? As Jamella's family and friends anxiously awaited news, the detectives understood that they needed to uncover the truth quickly, before everything was buried in darkness forever. The funeral that Tiffany organized for the newborn, following the mysterious disappearance of Jamela and her 3 children, quickly became one of the most bizarre events the community had ever witnessed. Tiffany's late arrival, 2 hours after the scheduled start, only fueled suspicions among the attendees. What should have been a heartbreaking farewell for an unfortunate child instead became a cold, strange gathering attended by only a few close friends and family members, including Tiffany's boyfriend, who had returned from the Navy to be by her side during what should have been a time of grief. From the moment Tiffany walked into the funeral, her behavior unsettled everyone present. Instead of the sorrowful expression expected of a mother grieving her child, Tiffany appeared with a detached, almost indifferent demeanor that sent chills down the spines of those watching. The atmosphere at the funeral was eerily quiet, with only a handful of people in attendance. This was particularly strange given that Tiffany had requested the service be delayed to allow more family members to attend. Yet only a few showed up. The most disturbing part was Tiffany's attitude, her coldness and apparent lack of any genuine emotion. Every gesture and word she made during the service suggested that the event was nothing more than an obligation to complete, rather than a heartfelt farewell. This icy behavior planted seeds of doubt in the mind of her boyfriend, who had left his duties in the military to support Tiffany in what he thought was her time of greatest need. But confusion clouded his gaze. The woman he thought he knew now seemed like a complete stranger. After the funeral concluded, Tiffany made a chilling confession in a tense and mysterious conversation with her boyfriend. Amid the silence and darkness, she revealed a horrifying secret: the child she had buried was not her own. "I took it from Jamela," she admitted, her voice calm but her words loaded with horror. In that moment, the terrifying truth of her crime began to unfold. Her confession struck like lightning, leaving her boyfriend utterly shocked. He couldn't believe that the woman before him, the one he once loved, was capable of such a monstrous act. Stunned and terrified, he immediately contacted the police. And so, the case, which had started as a disappearance investigation, transformed into an investigation of a brutal murder. The suspicions that had been brewing now materialized into an unimaginable reality. What the detectives had feared from the start was confirmed: Jamela and her unborn child had fallen victim to a meticulously planned and monstrous scheme. With a new focus in the investigation, detectives began uncovering every hidden part of Tiffany's life. They couldn't help but wonder what could drive her to target her lifelong friend. Could it have been a deeply rooted jealousy? Or perhaps a quiet but intense envy that pushed her to commit this crime? These unanswerable questions only added to the complexity and horror of the investigation. Following her confession about taking the baby from Jamela, Tiffany shared even more chilling details about that fateful night. In her statement, she explained that, on that night, when Jamela had come to Tiffany's mother's house, a dark plan was already in place. Tiffany struck Jamela on the head with a table leg until she was unconscious. Then, showing no sign of remorse, Tiffany bound Jamela's hands and feet with duct tape to ensure she couldn't resist. And in an act that could only be described as monstrous, Tiffany cut the baby from Jamela's womb while her friend was still alive. Every word of Tiffany's confession horrified the detectives. This was not just a murder but a premeditated and calculated act of unimaginable brutality. She had planned every detail. From the tools she had prepared for the birth she orchestrated, to the way she would dispose of the body to hide her crime. After committing the horrific act, Tiffany continued her life as if nothing had happened, even organizing a funeral to lend credibility to her web of lies. The community was in shock as the horrifying truth began to emerge. Those who had known Tiffany and Jamela were stunned and heartbroken. No one could have imagined that the close friendship between them, once seen as a precious bond, would end in such a horrifying tragedy. Tiffany, once thought of as a dear friend and mother, was now revealed to be a cold-blooded, calculated murderer. For her boyfriend and former friends, Tiffany's public behavior at the funeral took on a new, darker meaning. Her strange and emotionless demeanor was no longer just unusual, it was a clear sign of her cruel and deceitful nature. Tiffany was no longer the woman they once trusted and cared for, but a ruthless killer who would go to unimaginable lengths to carry out her twisted plans. No one could have anticipated the depth of her cruelty. And the investigation now became not only a search for the truth but an exploration into what could drive a mother, a friend, to become a merciless perpetrator. The investigation continued as detectives pieced together every clue to uncover the full scope of the crime. And in the hearts of the community, one question remained unanswered, echoing over and over: how could a person be so cold-blooded? What truly drove Tiffany to commit such an unforgivable crime? After receiving Tiffany's chilling confession, the police quickly moved to verify her statements. Suspicion and theories gradually turned into a brutal reality as investigators followed her lead, getting closer to the complete picture of an unspeakable crime. What the detectives uncovered wasn't just a harsh truth, it was an act of horrific cruelty that surpassed anything anyone could have imagined. Not long after Tiffany's confession, the police found Jamella's body in a patch of tall grass near Tiffany's house. The body was wrapped in a shower curtain, discarded like a piece of trash. This grim sight, though detectives were experienced in handling disturbing cases, made them pause due to its sheer brutality. Jamella, a young mother who once held dreams and hopes for her family, had ended her life in a tragic, inhumane manner, left behind as if she were nothing more than a lifeless object. The investigation continued, with horrifying details emerging as Tiffany described them during questioning. Her statements were nothing short of a horror movie script, recounted in a cold, indifferent tone, showing no remorse or guilt. According to Tiffany, on that fateful night, she had launched a sudden attack on Jamella, striking her on the head until she fell unconscious. But, shockingly, this was only the beginning of the premeditated atrocity that Tiffany had long planned. In her confession, Tiffany described how she bound Jamella's hands and feet with duct tape, ensuring she couldn't escape or cry for help. Even though Jamella was unconscious, she was still alive. But this detail didn't affect Tiffany's resolve to execute her gruesome plan. With a chilling calm, Tiffany proceeded with what she had meticulously envisioned. She dragged Jamella into the bathroom and began what can only be described as a monstrous act. In a statement that left detectives deeply shaken, Tiffany casually recounted how she used scissors to open Jamella's abdomen, removing the baby while Jamella was still alive. This act displayed not only cruelty but also a level of mercilessness that defied human decency. For the investigators, this was far more than a murder, it was a calculated atrocity, executed with a cold-bloodedness and cruelty beyond anything they had encountered before. Tiffany's ability to carry out such a deed without hesitation elevated the case to a new level of horror. Tiffany's confessions not only clarified what had happened but also exposed the dark depths of her mind. She narrated each detail as if it were a mundane story, showing no signs of regret or guilt. In the eyes of the detectives, Tiffany was no longer merely a murderer, she was a true monster. Someone willing to sacrifice everything, including her close friendship and humanity, to carry out an unforgivable crime. After committing this unimaginable act, Tiffany continued to execute her plan. She wrapped Jamella's body in the shower curtain, treating it as nothing more than disposable waste, and then carried it outside, abandoning it in a nearby field. This callous disposal only further highlighted the heartlessness of Tiffany's character. Not only had she taken the life of her once sister, but she had discarded Jamella's body with the same disregard, revealing her utter contempt for the life of someone who had been a friend. Throughout the investigation, each detail uncovered by the police only added to the horror of this case. Witnesses spoke of the close bond Tiffany and Jamella had shared since childhood, a friendship that, to outsiders, seemed unbreakable. But now, this bond was merely a tragic memory, marked by a dark and haunting end. Neighbors and friends were left in shock as the truth emerged, asking how a friendship could devolve into such a savage betrayal. The community couldn't escape the nightmare of the case as every new piece of evidence was revealed. Those who had known Jamella remembered her as a devoted mother and kind friend, constantly striving to provide the best for her children. And Tiffany, who had once been a part of Jamella's life, was now the person responsible for ending it in the most horrifying way. Each person in the community had to face the disturbing truth: sometimes we may never truly know the dark corners of the souls of those we trust. The case of Tiffany Hall became an ordeal not only for Jamella's family and friends but also for everyone following the story. The biggest question the community faced was, what could drive a woman to commit such ruthless violence? The shocking and tragic reality of this crime went beyond all rational limits. The police, loved ones, friends, and even strangers were left questioning what could have happened in Tiffany's mind to push her toward such an unimaginable act. To the detectives, this was no ordinary murder case. It was a tale of betrayal, obsession, and jealousy masked by the facade of friendship. Tiffany had abandoned everything: her humanity, her friendship, and even compassion, to carry out an act that anyone would shudder to imagine. The tragedy of Jamella Tunstall was far from over. Just as investigators believed they had reached the depths of horror with the discovery of Jamella's body, another layer of anguish unfolded, more painful and haunting. Jamella's 3 children, DeAndre, Ivan, and Janella, had vanished without a trace, casting a heavy shadow over the investigation and weighing on the hearts of the community. Those following the case shuddered at the thought: what had happened to these innocent children, who had yet to understand the complexities of the adult world? Police searched Jamella's apartment, hoping for a clue, however small, that could explain the children's disappearance. But they were completely unprepared for what they would find. Inside the cold, empty apartment, the investigators discovered the bodies of the 3 children stuffed inside the washing machine and dryer in horrific condition. The sight left even the most seasoned investigators frozen in shock, unable to shake off the indelible mark left by such cruelty. The image of these innocent lives, abandoned as if they were nothing more than objects, sent waves of horror through everyone present. The 3 children, far too young to grasp the terror around them, had become silent victims of an unforgivable crime. The community was plunged into disbelief, anger, and grief. The children, who once brought joy and laughter to their neighborhood, were now remembered only in heartbreaking memories. Friends, neighbors, and family struggled to cope with the haunting final image of the children, an image that no one could ever have imagined. During her interrogation, Tiffany calmly admitted to killing the children with brutal efficiency. She recounted each step of her actions with chilling composure, devoid of any remorse or regret, as if it had been inevitable. Tiffany described each horrific detail, saying she took each child, one by one, into the bathroom and drowned them in the bathtub without hesitation or pity. Her words struck the investigators like blows, drawing them deeper into a nightmarish story. But what disturbed them most was her cold, detached attitude. As if her actions were routine and unworthy of remorse. After committing this gruesome act, Tiffany methodically followed through with her plan. Placing the children's bodies into the washing machine and dryer. This heartless disposal wasn't just an attempt to hide the evidence, it symbolized a callous indifference toward the lives she had taken. Especially those of innocent children. For the investigators, Tiffany's actions revealed a twisted, disturbed mind. Stripped of empathy and basic humanity. People who had once known Tiffany could not fathom the motivations behind such brutal acts. What could have driven her to this? Was it a deep-seated jealousy? Or perhaps an uncontrollable psychological breakdown? Or was there something even more sinister at play? Buried in the depths of her mind? Even after confessing to everything, Tiffany refused to provide any explanation for her actions. Her silence left everyone, the police and the community, lost in confusion and fear. People couldn't help but wonder, what had really gone on in Tiffany's mind that would drive her to such lengths? Could she have been overtaken by an obsession, or was it simply cruelty that had turned her into a merciless killer? These unanswered questions gnawed at the community's conscience. How could a mother act with such brutality? And how could a friend become the deadliest enemy to the family she had once been close to? The community's sorrow and outrage knew no bounds. The children, DeAndre, Ivan, and Janella, had once been the pride of their mother. Precious young souls whom everyone adored. Their loss was a blow that words could never heal. A shock that reverberated through every heart. The image of the children found in the washing machine and dryer became a nightmarish reminder to those who knew them. An unbearable memory that everyone in the neighborhood would carry with them. No one could believe that such a horrendous tragedy had unfolded in the very heart of their community. The question of Tiffany's motive remains one of the most baffling aspects of the case. Psychologists and criminologists have tried to unravel the reasons behind her actions, attempting to understand why a mother would murder 3 innocent children. Yet every effort to understand her motivations ends in dead ends. Tiffany showed no emotion, expressed no remorse, and provided no clear reason for the horrific crimes she committed. To everyone, friends, family, neighbors, and detectives, Tiffany remains a dark enigma. A mother who turned into a ruthless killer. A friend who betrayed and destroyed the family she once seemed to care about. The case of Tiffany Hall goes beyond the tale of a gruesome crime. It is a reminder of the depths of moral and human decay. The portrait of a mind twisted beyond recognition. The story of these innocent children and the tragic death of Jamela stands as a haunting reminder. A painful lesson on misplaced trust. This painful memory forces us to realize that sometimes the most dangerous individuals aren't strangers, but the people we trust the most. The case may be closed, but it leaves the community with a host of questions that will likely never be answered. Why did Tiffany act in such a horrifyingly cruel manner? Was this the result of deeply rooted psychological trauma? Or was it simply the manifestation of a deranged mind? These questions may never find answers. But the story of Jamela and her children's tragedy will remain with those who know of it. As one of the most heartbreaking and unforgettable cases in the community's history. In 2008, Tiffany Hall's case reached its decisive moment when she was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For the families of the victims and the community, this sentence seemed like a fitting end to the series of horrific crimes that had haunted them for years. However, once the verdict was announced, a new wave of controversy emerged. Many questioned whether Tiffany was mentally fit to be held fully accountable, or if her mind had long been consumed by severe mental disorders dating back to her childhood. Psychological reports during the investigation and trial revealed that Tiffany suffered from multiple mental disorders, including schizophrenia, post-traumatic stress disorder, and even signs of intellectual disability. These symptoms had been documented from a young age, with Tiffany experiencing numerous hospitalizations and psychiatric treatments. This raised a crucial question: was Tiffany truly aware and in control of her brutal actions at the time of the crime? Or were her deeds the result of a mind entirely beyond her control? Although the court issued a final decision, Tiffany Hall's case left lingering doubts and unresolved controversies. Supporters of re-evaluating her sentence argued that if Tiffany genuinely suffered from severe mental disorders, she should have been treated under a specialized legal framework or even mental health care instead of life imprisonment. They argued that a person cannot be held fully responsible if they lack the capacity to clearly comprehend their actions. However, the victims' families and most of the public believed that Tiffany's sentence was entirely justified, insisting that no mental health condition could justify the level of cruelty she inflicted. Following her conviction, Tiffany persistently appealed her sentence, arguing that her initial defense lawyers were incompetent and had failed to fully consider her mental health condition. She claimed that her lawyers did not gather or present adequate evidence regarding her mental health. According to Tiffany, if her psychological condition had been more thoroughly highlighted during the trial, the outcome might have been different, sparing her from such a severe sentence. Despite multiple rejections of her appeals, Tiffany did not give up. She continued her fight. And in 2020, a significant development occurred when the court partially accepted her appeal, allowing her another opportunity to present new evidence regarding her mental state. This prolonged the case further, rekindling public debate on whether Tiffany Hall's case should be re-evaluated based on her mental health status. Tiffany's persistence in appealing was not simply an attempt to lessen her sentence, it posed a significant challenge to the legal system itself. The issue went beyond the complexity of her mental state and raised critical questions about how justice should be applied fairly to both victims and perpetrators. While psychological experts continued to analyze Tiffany's condition and debate her level of awareness, the victims' families and the public viewed it as nothing more than a legal strategy to escape responsibility. For Jamella's family and her children's relatives, each news of Tiffany's ongoing appeals reopened deep wounds. They believed that Tiffany's actions were unforgivable and that any defense was merely an attempt to avoid facing the consequences of her crimes. In their eyes, Tiffany had forfeited any right to leniency when she took the lives of their loved ones without remorse or compassion. However, some argued that this case deserved reconsideration, not to reduce her punishment, but to better understand Tiffany's mental state and the extent to which it may have influenced her behavior. Certain activists contended that if Tiffany was genuinely driven by severe mental disorders, she should be in a treatment facility rather than prison, as a life sentence could not help her heal or improve her condition. This perspective sparked significant controversy, with many still firmly believing that, regardless of the cause, Tiffany's crimes were inexcusable. In 2020, when Tiffany was granted permission to continue her appeals, the case became a focal point once again, raising the question, was justice fully served? Each time the case was mentioned, waves of public opinion surged, with contrasting views on how the legal system should handle mentally ill offenders like Tiffany. This wasn't merely the story of a heinous murderer but also a challenge for the justice system as it navigated complex psychological cases. To the public, Tiffany Hall's case is not just about seeking justice for those who died but also a lesson in understanding how we should treat offenders with mental health issues. Does Tiffany truly deserve life without parole? Or should she be given specialized treatment? This question remains unanswered, and the future of this case will likely continue to unfold, stirring further unresolved debates. Tiffany Hall's case is one that lingers in our minds, Not only because of the horrific nature of the crimes but also due to the unanswered questions surrounding her psychology and true motives. With a final sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, we are left pondering, is this sentence truly justice for the victims and their families? Or does Tiffany deserve a different, perhaps harsher, punishment to ease the pain of those affected? To Jamella's family, the sentence given to Tiffany hardly seems sufficient to make up for what they have lost. Their loss is immeasurable. Jamella, a young mother, met a brutal and unimaginable end. And her 3 innocent children were robbed of their lives without understanding what was happening. For those who loved them, no sentence could ever fully punish the person who took away all that was precious to them. Can life imprisonment alone truly be enough to bring justice? The question of justice and punishment in Tiffany Hall's case goes beyond just a legal sentence. This case has sparked a broader debate on how the legal system should handle offenders who may have unstable mental health conditions. To some, life imprisonment is wholly justified, as they believe anyone capable of such atrocious acts deserves the highest penalty. Yet others find the question of Tiffany's awareness of her actions at the time to be the center of this ongoing dispute. And this is what makes her case so haunting. Can we be certain that justice has truly been served? Tiffany Hall's case sheds a dark light on human nature. She wasn't a stranger to Jamella or her family. In fact, they considered each other family, sharing years of memories together. This closeness only makes Tiffany's crimes more incomprehensible and harder to accept. The betrayal of a close friend, of someone Jamella trusted, serves as a painful lesson to all of us, no matter how well we think we know someone. Do we ever really know what they might be capable of under extreme circumstances? With Tiffany sentenced to life, a question remains: did she deserve a different punishment? The crimes she committed have forever changed the lives of many. And for those who followed this case, there is a lingering feeling that justice may still not have fully been done. For some, taking away her freedom permanently may be the only fitting punishment. Yet for others, the sentence might still fall short of what it would take to erase the pain she caused. Since her sentencing, Tiffany Hall's case has become a subject of continuous reflection and debate. Every detail and testimony adds to a complex portrait of human nature and psychology. Those who witnessed the case realize that justice is not always clear-cut and as straightforward as we might wish. The complexities of the human mind, with its dark corners and incomprehensible motives, make questions of punishment and fairness far from simple. Now that Tiffany Hall's case has reached its conclusion, we want to hear from you. What do you think of the sentence handed down to Tiffany? Does life imprisonment truly match the brutality of her crimes? Or is there another punishment you feel would be more appropriate? Share your thoughts with us. In cases like this, every opinion helps us better understand how society should face such offenders and how we might best interpret justice. In the shadows of this case, perhaps the most frightening thought is not simply Tiffany's actions, but the idea that we can never truly know what someone might be capable of, even when we think we know them well. Thank you for joining me as we revisited this tragic case. I'm John. This is Killer Cases, and I'll see you in the next video.